Ms. Kern.
Yes, if everyone could please stand. Hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We welcome those who are here for purposes of addressing the board at the proper time and in the order of their request. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please fill out a form indicating your name and the agenda item you wish to address. You may also make a request to give testimony on an item not listed for discussion today. However, full discussion on any items not listed on the agenda will have to be delayed until such a time as the item can be publicly posted in advance as a regular agenda item. If you wish to ask questions, please address them to the chair and not to individual members of the board or to the staff. The board has been meeting in closed session regarding matters listed on today's closed session agenda and wishes to report that no reportable actions were taken. For public testimony on items listed on the agenda, we have nobody in person to speak. And do we have any, so we have public comments that we accepted online?
Yes, we have 3 that were emailed in.
Okay.
Hold on, that mic's not on. Flip the switch is right at the top. It's kind of a little switch.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it on?
Oh, yeah, okay, it is.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay. This is from Jennifer Larson. Dear Board of Education, I'm writing to you regarding the excessive amount of screen time that the district is requiring from students and teachers. This is universally a bad idea that has not been informed by any research or experience. This impacts parents greatly because they will have to monitor their children for lengthy periods of time. This does not accommodate working parents at all. Asynchronous instruction is a big part of distance learning. In spring, I spent inordinate amounts of time putting together units that were developmentally appropriate for my kindergartners, combing the web for engaging activities and ideas that I could use, creating math and language arts videos to teach my students in a fun and creative way, and responding personally with audio and video comments to reach every single student. This cannot be done if all of our time is spent monitoring our students on the screen. Quality instruction will suffer. There is no research that supports that students do well with 5 to 6 hours of screen time each day. The Board of Education must do their job and question this decision. You represent your constituents. We are against this abuse of our children. They are struggling through this pandemic, and LBUSD is making the community fight every step of the way for things that should readily be afforded to us. Question Jill Baker. She gave no answers to the teachers about this decision. She blatantly ignores those that she is supposed to serve. This leader is anti-ethical to what I know as the Long Beach way. Jill Baker exemplifies poor leadership. She is tarnishing the reputation of LBUSD. Get her out. A parent, a teacher, and alumni of LBUSD. Terry Johnson, 5th grade GATE teacher. Members of the board, first I would like to thank you for all the time you are putting in on behalf of our students, and also thank you for your replies to teacher and parent emails. However, even though the district has reached a tentative MOU with TALB, which we are very grateful for, the issue of synchronous versus asynchronous learning has not been addressed completely nor defined. As the proposed schedules read now, students are being asked to spend a large amount of time looking at their teachers and screens rather than working on their own. This is especially apparent when you look at the elementary schedules. I'm sure you are aware that this is not considered healthy for children. Therefore, I would simply ask that you direct the district's bargaining team to work with TALB, not just present to them To reduce that amount of time, students will be required to be online, face-to-face with their teacher daily. Thank you. I am Rashia Murphy, a parent of a third grader. I tweeted this week, I just completed the LBUSD School of Choice survey. I feel like I just promised my last born to Rumpelstiltskin. It was ridiculous to have parents commit to a school program for the entire academic year before securing staff. You have a labor problem, a workforce that is no longer willing to work at work. There is no way for you to all guarantee the integrity of the virtual home learning experience when your staff is at home. Distance learning is developmentally inappropriate for school-aged children, and there is a vast gap in access to essential tools for learning for students at home. No place to work, no internet, no supervision, new chores. And how can you do a hybrid program if your staff is not willing to work at work? I do not want a series of substitute pretenders babysitting my son, and Boys and Girls Club staff have never been comparable to the LBUSD playground staff. I really think school instruction should be suspended until you have secured a workforce that is willing to return to the work site, or parents should be allowed to change their school selection at any time. Placement tests, grades, SAR procedures, and other things like that should be suspended until traditional school resumes. We do not want another child jailed for not attending virtual instructions like in Michigan. My son was marked absent for the entire month of May, even though we have endless teacher cancellations, staff training, and teacher technical difficulties. School is so more than academic learning. Overall, both me and my son have felt abandoned. As you continue planning the school structure, make a more inclusive effort to engage stakeholders, child care providers, local employers, mental health students in all grades, yes, even the kindergartners, and more parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment for, excuse me,
Nothing for not on the agenda.
Okay. So no public testimony on items not listed on the agenda. So we have an opening of school update.
Thank you, Madam President. We actually are going to continue yesterday's agenda with Dr. Simon and Mr. Brown are going to take off from the discussion around social emotional learning measurement and for the plans for this year to engage students in many new aspects of social emotional learning. And so made a little adjustment to our agenda to continue the conversation from yesterday, and then we'll go directly into the school opening update.
Good morning.
So we'll jump right in and pick up where we left off. We accomplished a lot yesterday, look. So, as you heard yesterday, part of the charge of the research office this year is to work very closely with the Office of Student Support Services and the Office of Curriculum and Instruction to really think about our plan for SEL, for social emotional learning. How are we going to integrate it into our classrooms, into our education system, and importantly, how are we going to measure it? What are we going to look at in terms of monitoring our kids' growth in social emotional learning? So we wanted to start today with a little background on what we mean when we talk about social emotional learning, and then some of the metrics that we've historically been collecting, where we stand currently, and what are our plans moving forward. So I'd like to invite my colleague up, Dr. Simon, to talk briefly about the background for social emotional learning.
Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. Always have to
morning.
adjust the mic a little bit for the tall lady right here. So, Madam President, members of the board, as always, it is a pleasure to be with you today. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Chris Brown, for that introduction. The SEL metrics, as shown in Mr. Brown's last slide, are the 5 CASEL competencies. Now, before I delve into these competencies, please allow me some time to discuss who and what CASEL is. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, is a trusted source for knowledge about high-quality, evidence-based, social and emotional learning, which we call SEL. CASEL supports educators and policy leaders and enhances the experiences and outcomes for all pre-K through 12 students. LBUSD staff believes the 5 CASEL competencies can be expressed across developmental stages, but differently by culture. Just know that we will not implement SEL without regard to students' cultural, racial, ethnic, linguistic, or economic backgrounds. This will hopefully mitigate some students feeling alienated in their classrooms, and our efforts are centered around implementing SEL, whereby students and teachers build strong, respectful relationships, right? We know that's super important, the relationships between our students and also our teachers. Founded on an appreciation of similarities and differences. Learn to critically examine root causes of inequity and develop collaborative solutions to community and social problems. So the CASEL competencies are noted here. They are a framework for example, and it's evidence-based, as I mentioned in the first slide. And the core competencies present the LBUSD with an amazing opportunity to build off key social and emotional competencies through an equity lens. So you're going to hear more about equity when Dr. Joe Baker and Dr. Brown and the team discusses the equity within their offices. The core competencies include, if you look at self-awareness, I'm not going to read each of these points to you, but identify emotions, accurate self-perception, if you go to self-management, impulse control, stress, management, self-discipline, self-motivation for social awareness, perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, respect for others, relationship skills. You have communication, social engagement, and then for responsible decision making, you have identifying problems, analyzing situations, solving problems, and then also the ethical responsibility that we wield, right, to help our students understand and make better choices. So if you look at SEL using an equity lens, in January of 2020 of this year, a social emotional learning steering committee was formed to address the following data. And Mr. Chris Brown went over some of that data yesterday in regards to chronic absenteeism, suspensions. He also discussed our emotional disabled students, who we call ED, and also the core survey. The core survey is where we get a lot of perceptions from our students and staff and our parents about their feelings, about what's happening in their district and also within their classes and their school sites, how safe they feel. Steering members were asked to go out and learn from our most important stakeholders. And who are those stakeholders? The most important stakeholders are students. Empathy interviews were conducted by members of the SEL committee to glean the thoughts and feelings of our students. Students were asked the following questions, per se. And this is only a short list of those questions. How are your emotional needs addressed at school? And what would help you feel more connected? So based on those interviews, we learned that students' perspectives demonstrated that the recent societal issues have definitely exacerbated inequities. Many of the issues we understand will be out of our control. However, we do know that we have control with building relationships with our students. That's one thing that we can do. Giving everyone a voice. We want our students to have a voice. You've heard some staff talk about how they want students to be a part of their advisory groups and things of that nature, because we know that their perspectives and perceptions of students are highly important and also helps drive the work that we do. And we also want to ensure that we're showing empathy and caring for one another. That said, for the LBUSD, SEL is going to be more than just a lesson, right? It's not just going to be what people call a spray and pray. It's going to be intentional work that is systemic throughout this district. So therefore, we are planning for, and as you can read by the slides, a systemic and sustainable approach to SEL. We want this work to have longevity, not for it to be a 1 year or 2 year commitment, but for it to be something that we do right from here on out. SEL that intentionally cultivates a caring, participatory, culturally relevant, and equitable learning environment for all. And that's the key word, all students. SEL is a process that will allow students and teachers to examine root causes of inequity, right? Those are conversations that we had yesterday. What are those root causes? I think Dr. Benitez mentioned that yesterday as well. SEL is a process that allows for students and teachers to develop collaborative solutions to community and social problems. And we know that's very significant right now with everything that's happening right now in our communities. And then SEL that's infused into every part of students' daily lives, across all of their classrooms, during all times of the day, and when they are in their homes, and also in their communities. Now, my colleague, Mr. Chris Brown, will walk you through the correlation between SEL and behavior, and also SEL and grades. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Simon. So as you know, I'm big into correlations and big into asking the question about why do we look at something and what are we trying to assess. So when we talk about SEL, there's been a lot of research done around how does students' reporting of their social emotional learning relate to other impacts, such as behavior. So we know, for example, that self-management and social awareness, two of the categories that we measure and two of the categories that we are planning to teach deliberately during social emotional learning, are actually highly correlated to student behavior. In fact, the only thing that's more correlated to student behavior is GPA. So obviously, SEL has a big impact on what our students are experiencing and how they're behaving when they're on campus. So obviously, they're items 2 and 3. But SEL is more than just behavior. When you look at the relationship between social emotional learning and grades, you see that self-management and self-efficacy, two of those categories, are the third and fourth highest correlated factors to student grades, right behind math and English assessments, right? So obviously, these social emotional categories are very important to us because they have a big bearing on student progress, right? And not just student progress in grades, not just student progress in behavior, but the entire student experience on our campuses. So this is one of the reasons that we're taking a really deep dive into social emotional learning and really being very strategic about how we're going to roll it out over the next few years, as well as how we're going to measure progress on it. And I remind everybody that it really comes to the graduate profile. When you look on the graduate profile, we do not talk about Long Beach graduates just being good in English or math when they leave, right? When you look at those graduate profile categories, their students are ethical decision makers. They're adaptable and productive citizens. They're critical and innovative problem solvers. They're college and career-ready scholars. And they're effective communicators and collaborators. Where the social emotional categories from CASEL have direct links to all of the things that we say that we are trying to get our students to be after they spend 12 or 13 years in our system, TK through 12. And so we're really using the graduate profile as our guiding source when we think about working down to what are we going to focus on each year with our students. Like Dr. Simon said, historically, our major source of social emotional learning data for our students is the core survey. And the core survey is given every year in February. It's a snapshot of where our students are at. And for the past 6 or so years, we've really focused on 4 of the 6 big competency areas. So we've measured students' self-responses in social awareness, growth mindset, self-efficacy, and self-management from 2014 until 2019. In 2019-2020 school year, right before we went on redirected learning, we added questions around the 2 other categories that Dr. Simon talked about, relationship skills and responsible decision making, so that we can start to build a fuller picture aligned to the CASEL competencies of our students' social emotional learning. And so I want to show you some sample questions that the students get, that the students are responding to help us get an indication of where they fall on this social emotional growth over time. And then I'm going to show you a little bit how we track it. So one of the new questions we added last year was for students to indicate how much they disagree or agree with these statements. I can talk easily with other kids in my grade. I feel comfortable working with a team of other students. I have friends at school. These are really getting down to those relationship skills that they're building, those peer relationships. And then we're going to look at how those things change over time as a student moves from 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade through middle and into high school, so we can see if there's areas where we need to provide support or more direct critical instruction on students on how to build these relationship skills with their peers. We also added some questions to the core survey around responsible decision making. So we asked students within the past 2 weeks, how often have they waited patiently in line, waited their turn to talk in class, told the truth even though it was hard, right? These are those responsible decision-making skills. And I go back to that graduate profile where we said that our 12th grade graduates are ethical decision makers. This is really getting at how are we monitoring ongoing that we're getting there, that we're meeting that outcome before we get to 12th grade and hope. All right, we have a couple of reporting tools, and these are going to be new to our staff this year. They're something that we'll be providing training out of the research office on for our sites so that they can really figure out where they have, because I believe Dr. Benitez, yesterday you were talking about that targeted intervention, right? Making sure we're not doing everything globally, but we're targeting. And so we have some tools to help our sites target their interventions. So they've always been able to look at their overall growth mindset for their school and say, hey, our students are going up or down, and look at demographic breakdowns. High schools have been able to look by pathway, but we were able to now get a little more granular in our data moving forward. We have a new view that I've given you a slide of that really allows us to go and sort. So schools will be able to sort their students by how they responded on metrics to really drill down and get a subset of students who are struggling with maybe self-efficacy or growth mindset or relationship building skills. And then they can design an intervention for those students, meet with those students, so they can actually get to the 20 students that have a subset of indicators. And so if you look on the second slide, this is an example from one of our middle schools. And you can tell it's a large middle school. But we filtered down. So we looked for 7th grade, female students with above 95.5% attendance and a GPA between 3 or 4. And we looked at what were their metrics. And when we did that, we noticed that in this instance, self-efficacy was actually pretty low for this group. And this group represented 25 students out of the over 1,000 that were at the school. So now I know that for these 25 students, we need to do some work to support their self-efficacy, right? Their ability to get things done, their ability to believe they can get things done. And so our schools will now have this ability to drill down and design supports for very specific groups of students. But even more than that, we can pick one of those 25 students and track how they've responded over time. So how did February of 2018 versus February of 2019 look for this student? So we picked a sample student, and you'll see for this student that the student's social awareness metric went up. You can see that relationship skills and responsible decision making didn't change because we only added those last year. But their growth mindset really fell over this period of time. And so now I have some work I could do maybe as a counselor, where I could meet with the student and talk about what's happening, what's going on that would cause the growth mindset to fall, and how do we recover that with our students. So we now have some really specific tools to get in to work with our students. And because we did give the survey before we left, I'd like to just leave you with, or before I leave you, show you exactly where we felt kind of broadly before we left for the year in the spring. So a few highlights when it comes to social emotional learning. Our elementary students' sense of self-efficacy, they have a 69% positive or favorable response rate. And we would love to see all of our students respond favorably, but just for comparison's sake, when compared to the other districts in the Core Data Collaborative, 69% puts us in the top 20% of all districts for those group of kids. So that shows you about where we're falling everywhere else. Secondary students were 56% positive on that same metric, which puts us in the middle band, the middle quartile. We're right about 53rd% or somewhere in there when compared to the other core districts. And the gap between our highest indicating groups and our lowest indicating groups for self-efficacy at elementary was 10%, and at secondary was 14%. So we do have some work we could do with interventions around making sure we find those students who have low reporting of self-efficacy and work with them to build them up. We did break it down by pathways, just so you know. So if you looked at pathways and middle school and elementary and K-8 schools, 76% of our high school pathways or middle and elementary schools scored above our district average, and 57 scored below. So when you think about that, we have a lot of schools that are above average, and then we have a few schools or a few pathways that are significantly below average. So something for us to work on is we can find out where those schools are that are above average, look at what they're doing as best practices, and then show those best practices, share and train with our schools that need the support. So not everybody's going to need the exact same supports, so we can really target where we provide those supports. For self-management, we score higher. So students in our district really have a much favorable response rate for self-management than they do for self-efficacy. So they're in the middle quartile, 71%. And there's some typos here, I apologize for that. And secondary students are 73%, the fourth quartile. So our secondary students are actually a little bit higher than our elementary students on self-management, as opposed to self-efficacy. And then the gaps are 15 and 11% respectively between the highest responding subgroup and the lowest responding subgroup. So our district average overall is 74%. So 74% of our students district-wide respond favorably to self-management questions, with our pathways and schools split about evenly, 70 above and 63 below that district average mark. Social awareness is another area in social emotional learning, and this is an area where we actually score very well compared to the core districts. So elementary student social awareness, 77% of our students respond favorably. That is a tremendously high number. It puts us very much towards the top of other core districts. So our elementary students very much feel that they are socially aware. And that's something that gives us some work to build on, right? That's something we can leverage in our work on social emotional learning and our work on equity with our students. They have a socially aware lens that we can use with our teachers. Secondary students is 70%, so it's, again, very high. And that puts us in the fourth quartile, so the top 30% or so. Fourth quintile, I should say. You also notice that the gaps aren't quite as big as they are for some of the other social emotional metrics. So they're 8 and 10% for secondary and elementary students respectively, which is a little bit smaller than some of the self-management groups. So our social awareness data is all really clustered in that 70 to 77% area. And then most of our pathways are above it, so we have a few that are a little bit below the average that we need to work on. And the numbers, like I said, are much higher than the number of schools because we broke down high schools by pathway instead of by high school, because there's variability between the high school pathways on each campus. And so that helps us really target into which pathways may need to work on which particular areas of social emotional learning. And this is just where we were before COVID. Now, one of the problems with the core survey is it's given once per year. It's a snapshot of data that you get in February. And we know that anecdotally, if there's something happening on a campus in February, you can see that event affect the results of the core survey. And so you'll see campuses change wildly from one year to the next based on if they had an incident on that campus between one year and the next. Because you saw some of the questions. They ask about in the last 2 weeks. So when a kid takes a survey in February, they're really thinking about their last few weeks at school, and that last few weeks at school impacts the results on that survey. And so we're starting to see over time that you get some wild fluctuations, and trend data is really hard to find. So that makes us think about next steps moving forward. What do we want to do? And so as we move into the upcoming years, one of the things we want to think about is how do we monitor this data in an ongoing way? How do we track it in a more rapid cycles so that we see how does it change during the course of the year? Are we getting very different response rates in October, say, than we would in February? And some sites did that on their own. So I do have to say there are some sites who gave sample core surveys to their student bodies in October and December and January the last couple of years so that they had their own sort of data. And this is how we anecdotally know that February data is really variable, because they would get wild swings between their December report and their February report if something had happened on their campus or something happened in the community around their campus. So we have some sites that are doing this, and we really want to make that a systemic process. We really want to do that for all sites. We want to give everybody a tool to monitor that data ongoing. We also want to look at some correlations. We want to look for, are there things that they're measuring? Are there social emotional works that we can do that impact other things, like student academic outcomes, student behavior outcomes? So, for example, One of the things our schools work a lot on is sense of belonging. They work on really building that sense of belonging for their students. And the question I'm starting to ask is, what other metrics are tied? If you're seeing an increase in sense of belonging, do we see increases in academic output? Do we see increases in attendance? Do we see decreases in behavioral incidents? I don't know. And so those are the kind of questions we're going to ask moving forward, so that as they have these interventions built on sense of belonging or growth mindset or self-efficacy, we're going to try and look for those other outcomes for them so that they can really measure the impact of their resources and measure the impact of their interventions. And then, of course, when you have those impactful interventions, sharing that with your other sites that have similar issues to deal with, right? We have a huge system, and we have genius all over that system. And so, getting that genius out of the sites, out of the silos, and helping each other so we can help all of our students is a big thing that our office can help do. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to work with the Core Data Collaborative, and they're creating a system of surveys besides the core survey in February. So there's going to be one given in the fall that's a return post-COVID SEL and student well-being survey that we're going to give to our students to get a feel for where they are coming back to us after being redirected in March. And then we're going to give what are called pulse surveys. So 3 to 5 question surveys that we can give every few weeks to every few months. Really, we're going to work with sites to roll out how they want to do that. We can give them out through the Canvas LMS so they can go straight to the kids, through the teachers. The teacher would see it and the teacher would just push it out as an assignment. So it's not something that has to take away from the daily instruction. It's not something where we have to redirect for an entire day to give a survey like we do with the core when we have to pull all the kids in and do it. It's something that happened quickly and rapidly. And CORE has built us, or is building for their collaborative, and we're going to pilot it at no cost, the Rally tool. And so Rally tool will be a tool where teachers and administrators can look at the results of those surveys as they happen and really monitor student progress in real time. So if I've given 3 pulse surveys between October and December, I can see in the Rally tool how students or groups of students or my students as a teacher in a classroom have responded to that. So if I'm thinking about, I'm giving lessons and I'm integrating social emotional learning, I'm really working on growth mindset, I can actually track my students' change in how they respond on growth mindset over the months that I've been giving those lessons. And so to your point, Mr. Meyer, yesterday, right, as a teacher, I can tie what I'm doing to an immediate outcome. And now I can see if I'm making a difference, and if not, do I need to tweak what I'm doing? And if I do, fine, I tweak what I'm doing and we move forward. So it's that idea of giving that rapid cycle of data back to them where they can access it on their own, as opposed to having to wait to give something in February and get the results in May and see how your year went and then make a tweak that you're going to roll out for the entirety of the next year. This will be a quicker piece of data for them. So we're going to work with our sites around the questions they have and the needs that they have. We're going to monitor SEL. We're going to work with Dr. Simon and Dr. Kale around what kind of questions we might want to add to the core surveys to specifically get at what we're helping our teachers learn. And we're still working to make sure we align to all the CASEL competencies. So as we work on our questions, we want to make sure they align to those CASEL competencies so that we have clean alignment throughout. So that's the work of research in terms of social emotional learning and metrics, because you measure what you value, and we do value this. So that's that, and I'll open up for any questions you guys have.
Thank you. So just to clarify from my understanding, so CASEL and that culturally relevant set of guidelines or set of, that process is the programmatic piece, and we're still using the core surveys and the core data as the metric that we're measuring that work, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's not a new measurement tool, it's just an implementation programmatic tool.
Yeah, we've added pieces to it, and we're
Right.
making sure we're aligning it to CASEL so that there's an alignment between what we're doing and what we're measuring.
Chris,
Wonderful.
this is good stuff, but as with yesterday, the question remains, what do we do?
And that's a question that I think we'll roll out as it's a strategic plan between the Office of Curriculum and the Office of Student Supports on how we're going to help teachers integrate social emotional learning, because what we're not looking for is having a separate social emotional learning lesson, right? We want it to be integrated into the teacher's work with students and integrated into the teacher's lessons with students. So that's something we have to provide training and support on moving into the year. And so I would defer to my 2 colleagues too on that.
Okay, Ms. Kerr is going to complete her question, and then Dr. Benitez, it'll be your turn.
I appreciate that we have incredible data nerds who've had this position for the last several years. So in all of the leading up to answering, getting more and more specific around the work so that we can support students and families. I'm really appreciative of the pulse survey and that kind of that trend work that we're going to do, because we know any point in time survey is just that. It's a point in that time. And wondering with our communities, if there was an incident in a neighborhood or a part of town, is a pulse survey something that we could formulate and send to specific schools to see if or what the degree of reaction is to a particular incident? Because if something happens in one part of town, it may not have an impact somewhere else. So if we did a district-wide that week, we'd see different things. But I'm thinking as an intervention or an immediate response to be able to push something out to a cluster of schools where there may be a more critical neighborhood or community issue, and then be able to use that work to measure and work with our partners at the city and our partners in the community to say, we're seeing an increased need in this cluster of schools. So wondering if this potentially is a tool to do work like that as a community intervention, even more so than just a single school intervention.
So on the technical side, absolutely. So with the pulse surveys, there's actually a menu of pulse surveys you can give, because they're short, right? So they don't cover everything, and they're definitely not something where we would give everyone in the system the same pulse survey at every time, but they'd really be targeted to what is the site working on, or what are those teachers working on, and here's your selection of pulse surveys you might want to give. So if you had something happen that affected an area of a few schools, you could give a different survey or give a pulse survey at that time that you aren't giving to anybody else. Technically, absolutely no problem doing that.
I mean, it might be something to talk to CORE about, to say, maybe in what they give us as those pulse surveys is to really look for a community response survey to a crisis or an incident.
Yeah, we can definitely ask that.
Well, I would also say this, with CASEL, it allows teachers to explore questions from an equity lens, right, at any time. So with our SEL TOSAs, so we've had one within the elementary office for a year. We just hired one for secondary to work with our middle and high school teachers and staff. And so these folks are going to help teachers, right, build SEL right into the curriculum, right, just throughout the day. So at any time, right, if there's something that happens within the community, it could be a conversation. Ask these questions. Let's get the pulse. Let's hear what students are saying. Then that will also help, direct and guide our steps about just the next steps we should take for that. So if we need to, right, employ another pulse survey just immediately or within a week or a few days after an incident, we can do that to get more of students' perspectives about what happened.
Dr. Benitez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, Aaron, I want to build on part of our conversation from yesterday with regards to the challenges that we have had in the past, but they're magnified challenges during COVID regarding communication with our students at home and with our families. I love the fact that we're putting out surveys and we're asking and we're doing assessments and needs, but by the same sort of thinking and rationale from yesterday's conversation, based on the surveys that we have done in the last few months, we do have a big disparity in both responses, but also the variance in the subgroups that we talked about yesterday. In addition, our poor students, our emerging bilinguals, our students of color, our students with disabilities, were already experiencing trauma prior to COVID-19, and that trauma has either been magnified or there's added trauma during COVID-19. So my question is around both communication and the challenges with that, but also the variances in the responses that we get. And here I'm talking about both district-wide, right, by geography, but also within schools for these populations of students. So I'm wondering, again, given that we will have different points of gathering data, how we can use part of our conversation from yesterday, the communication and the challenge piece, to specifically address the needs of our highest need students now, right? Given that this return to school in 2 weeks is disproportionately negatively impacting those students that we're seeking to do these SEL interventions with, but at the same time, our virtual environment is probably part of that trauma and that challenge, right? So any thoughts, and I'm not looking for an answer right now, just kind of throwing it out there for our conversation. Any thoughts on that this virtual environment may actually be part of the stressor, trauma, challenges with self-efficacy, given that you have structural limitations and challenges, particularly for those students that would most benefit from our SEL interventions and strategies?
Dr. Benitez, thank you for your question. I would say a part of the SEL conversation, or just to work around SEL, is also conducting, I guess you can call them wellness checks. So before students begin their day, right, there will be questions posed to students around how are they feeling and things of that nature. I think there are some challenges with teaching virtually, distance learning, we all know that, right, based on those challenges. But there's also some creative ways that we can utilize the distance learning platform to engage our students and also to, ask certain questions. What we do know is that if a student is not present, right, via Zoom, via our platform, then we would have our staff members reach out to those families to discuss, first of all, how are you doing? Not necessarily why wasn't your child on Zoom this morning, but first of all, how are you? How are you doing? Is there anything that we can help you with? And then we noticed that your child wasn't present in class today. Is there anything that we can help you with? And let's have a conversation. And I can say this is part of the work that our Family Resource Center staff has conducted, especially during school closure, alongside the support staff at the school sites. And we've been able to, I don't want to say engage all, sometimes I don't want to say that's impossible, but that's very difficult. But we've been able to engage as many parents as we possibly can, right, or could during that time. So that's something that we're going to continue doing. I know with staff, there's some staff who are willing to go out to the homes to conduct home visits if they're safe, and we're going to get even more guidance around that. I believe that's the best way to engage our parents, especially meeting them where they are. But again, we have to make sure that that's safe for staff. So we're going to, implement these kind of phases, if you will, of how to engage our parents, and even based on when it's safe, when we receive the go-ahead from our public health officials or, our government to do so. But trust me, that's something that's heavy on our hearts to engage, right, all those subgroups that we talked about yesterday that are usually the most difficult to engage with. So again, that's heavy on our hearts.
And just to add to that for just a second, I think one of the background pieces we've talked about, in addition to the data nerd piece around wanting to take data more frequently, when you ask questions more frequently, then you can actually find out who's not responding and then go and provide support and give them an opportunity to respond. When you only ask once a year, and if you miss them during that ask, then you miss that perspective and you don't get that perspective. But if you ask repetitively and then you find out who's not responding and then you go and interact with those people and get them to respond, then you can hear that perspective. So for me, that's one of the discussion points behind why we want to give pulse surveys, why we want to take data more frequently, is to make sure we don't miss on the one and done and miss the perspective.
And I think you mentioned that you can push these out via Canvas, so teachers individually can push out this work. So they'll know which of their students are responding, and they could be the students that aren't checking in for school. So we'll have that very specific data as well, as opposed to, again, a point in time issue. So it'll give school sites clarity on who those families might be a little more quickly than we've been able to do in the past.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Meyer?
Good stuff again, Chris. I'm concerned that our concern with the social well-being of our students strikes at the very way we organize our schools. For example, I'm very, very satisfied with the opportunity for our elementary teachers to connect with the same group of kids all year, to follow them with love and care and interventions that are necessary. We lose that when the kids go to the middle school. One teacher passes them on to the next, and high school's even worse. Harking back to the old days, we used to have what they called a home room at the elementary and high school level. Every day, the same group of 35 students reported to the same teacher for a brief period of time. In my day, it was Mr. Hunt the Runt, and he was a great guy. But we were connected with the same students and the same individual every day for the passage of information, for the interventions that Mr. Hunt thought he saw in our students. So we talk about, and this is all good stuff, but it strikes at the way we organize our schools, and maybe we need to evaluate that too.
I would like to add to what you were saying, Dr. Benitez, about our kids being affected by being at home, by being quarantined, and this is not just a problem on one part of our district or another part of our district. This is really widespread. It's a bigger problem than just our district. I've been hearing from parents who are concerned about their kids because their kids were previously outgoing and extroverted, and since this whole quarantine situation and the problems that it has caused, now their kids are more quiet, introverted, and even depressed. So there are so many issues that we have to take into consideration with the situation that we're in, and I think we have a lot of resources that we're working on. It sounds like we have a lot of things built into the schedule so that we can help and address those issues of isolation, of your sense of well-being. And also, do we have resources for parents online? Maybe you can address that, Dr. Simon?
Yes, and that's a big part of our work is how do we equip our parents and guardians with the tools, right, to help their students at home. And we learned that more specifically this summer, during our time with the Family Resource Centers when they were serving all 85 schools. As you mentioned, Madam President, we had families, not just from, right, certain pockets of the city, but from the entire, right, city, right? Different communities who are reaching out, saying that same thing. How can we provide services? What kind of support can you give me to help my students at home? So long story short, we do have resources. We've have been working, alongside ECR, with Parent University. We build YouTube videos. We have Google Classrooms where we're going to push out a lot more work and a lot more support for our families. Hopefully we can utilize the district's YouTube channel to do more webinars and workshops for our families. We have mindfulness parent training coming up with our Family Resource Centers. There are so many great ideas that have been generated. Now it's just putting those ideas to fruition and employing our students and our families to have these wonderful tools. So the equipped and equipping our families is our next phase in this work, because we're hearing that a lot.
I'm happy to hear that we're moving forward with heart and compassion. It's time that we take a break, so we're going to have a 10-minute recess, and we will reconvene at 11. Thank you, everybody. 10, I'm sorry. 10. We'll reconvene at 10.